1. Archer Abel stood under the awning of the Knoxville Middle School bus circle after school, sweating in the mid-November heat. It was unseasonably warm for Lost Key, Florida, but that wasn't what was making Archer perspire. Was it obvious that something shady was going down, he wondered? Or did it just look like a couple of honor roll nerds having a random conversation? He glanced around cautiously to make sure no one was looking. But most of the Knoxville Middle School students and teachers had already gone home. Archer and his classmate Parker Rush were the only ones around. Still, he hunched over secretively as he flipped open a wrinkled white envelope and inspected what was left of his birthday money. 20 measly dollars. He sighed as he pulled out half. "Here you go," Archer said, with a note of dismay. Parker snatched the bill, eager green eyes and red freckles bouncing. "Awesome," he chirped. He stuffed the cash into his pocket. As Parker rummaged through his backpack for the trade, Archer tugged nervously at his bow tie. All of a sudden, it felt tight. At least he had worn it with a short-sleeved cotton shirt, but the selvage jeans had been a mistake. Too heavy on a day as muggy as this. Should have worn linen shorts. His only consolation was that he knew he looked fantastic. Unlike Parker, who wore faded clothes that were woefully undersized and clashed terribly with his red hair. Archer thought he should have paid Parker in fashion advice instead of money. Finally, Parker's hand emerged with a stapled bunch of papers. He handed them to Archer. Common Misconceptions About the Slave Trade in the U.S. by Archer Abel, read the title page. Archer gasped. "Archie! What were you thinking?" "No one calls me that." Parker winced. "Oh, sorry. I can fix it. First thing in the morning. Meet me here before school?" Archer sighed again. "Don't worry about it. Mrs. Wesson probably won't even notice. But next time? Next time? There's another essay due in 2 weeks. That one is supposed to extol the virtues of Andrew Jackson's humanitarian efforts to preserve American Indians. Ugh, as though what he did wasn't both immoral and illegal." Archer rolled his eyes dramatically as he said this. Parker looked confused. Archer explained. "Andrew Jackson passed the Indian Removal Act in order to forcibly segregate Native Americans, even though the Supreme Court ruled it unconstitutional. But you can't say that, remember? That's why I hired you to write the essays for me. Just thinking about the revisionist history they're teaching us makes me gag. No way I'm spending my precious time writing it down." Right, Parker said. But Archer could tell that giving a pass to white colonialist supremacy wasn't as much of a problem for Parker as it was for him. "Okay, well, thanks again. See you later," Parker said, tossing his backpack over his shoulder. As Parker trotted off, Archer went back to inspecting the paper. The rubric for Mrs. Wesson's history assignment stipulated that students demonstrate a fair and balanced approach to the discussion of slavery, which their textbook called Black immigration. Northern and Southern viewpoints must be considered equally, she had written. That was just a fancy way of saying that Mrs. Wesson wanted the students to gloss over any facts that might be offensive to fragile white egos. Although it is agreed that Southern workers were sometimes treated unfairly, Parker had written. The country prior to the Civil War was a complicated and divided nation, and historians are still not in agreement with regards to the exact cause or outcomes of the War of Northern Aggression. Parker had followed Mrs. Wesson's directions perfectly, just like he had done on the last 2 essays Archer had paid him to write. both of those essays had received A's. Archer took a deep breath. He wondered what his mother would have said if she'd read the essay. She probably would have demanded that Archer tell the truth, regardless of the rubric. But then he would have received a failing grade. And then what would have been the point of moving to Lost Key to live with his grandparents? His parents had moved him temporarily because Knoxville was far safer than his home school, and it had a renowned math and science program. If he continued to be a straight-A student, he could apply for an academic scholarship to the best private high school in Mobile. And if he did well there, he planned on applying to Harvard. Archer wasn't about to risk his academic goals when he could just pay someone like Parker to do the dirty job of writing revisionist history essays for him. Except, Parker charged $10 per essay, and Archer only had $10 left. One more payment, and then he'd have to write the essays himself. Archer carefully slid the essay into a folder in his backpack and began the humid walk back to his grandparents' house. "Hey, Archer! Wait up!" a voice called from behind. Archer turned to face Mabel Mundell, his best friend and confidant. Mabel's long, black hair splayed out behind her like a cape as she ran. Her Converse sneakers slapped the concrete as she slowed to walk in step beside him. "Did I just see you talking to Parker Rush?" Mabel asked in surprise. "I didn't know you were friends." "Hi," Archer responded, ignoring her question. "What were you still doing at school? You never stay after." "Makeup quiz, so I don't fail pre-algebra." Mabel ran an arm over her forehead, wiping away sweat. She was dressed for mid-January in a long-sleeve raglan tee and overalls. Archer shook his head with a laugh. She had no more fashion sense than Parker, but he knew better than to argue with her choices. Mabel Mundell had a mind of her own about everything. "You know, you could always ask me to tutor you," Archer offered. "I don't need tutoring, Mr. Smarty Pants," Mabel scoffed. "I know how to math." Yes, of course. That must be why you're failing." They turned a corner down a long, flat expanse of sidewalk that crossed into a tract neighborhood of 1960s homes, all lined up in neat little rows. Mabel reached up and twisted her silky black hair into a bun that she held on top of her head so her neck could air out as they walked. "I'm very smart," Mabel argued. "I just don't care as much about my grades as you do. In fact, I don't know why you care at all. They don't even teach us anything useful." Archer considered his history curriculum and thought Mabel had a point, but he countered anyway with, "It isn't always about what they teach, Mabel. Making good grades opens doors for your future." "Blah," Mabel stuck out her tongue. "You sound like Mr. Jones, the guidance counselor. That's the kind of blah, blah, blah he would say on career day." "Well, he's not wrong." Archer switched his backpack from one shoulder to the other. "If you got good grades, you could get into a good college, and then you could have a high-paying job someday." He shot Mabel a provocative side-eye. "Unless you plan on babysitting for the rest of your life." "Oh, speaking of babysitting," Mabel gave a little hop. "You said you might be interested in earning some money. Something about Taylor Swift?" "Harry Styles," he corrected her. Archer had almost given up on the idea of buying concert tickets, given that he had pretty much blown his savings paying for his history essays. "Whatever. The point is, I have a job for you, if you're still interested." Archer wasn't the least bit interested in babysitting, but he was interested in the money. "So, you make, like, $30 an hour still?" "Yes! Can you believe?" Mabel squealed as they approached his grandparents' immaculate home. It was a quaint brick ranch house with a cozy concrete front porch, deep awnings over the windows, and a set of perfectly round bushes lining the driveway. Archer's grandpa Bob had meticulously manicured the landscaping until it looked like something out of a video game. It was that picture perfect. Archer checked the manatee-shaped mailbox on their way in, then pulled his keyring out of his pocket to get in the front door. No, I cannot believe they pay you that much. What's the catch? Their feet echoed as they crossed the tile entry to the dining room, where Archer placed the mail in a wicker basket. Mabel beelined for the kitchen, following the heavenly aroma of Grandma Dinette's baking. Mabel moaned. What is that smell? Archer's grandmother stood at the oven, pulling a tray of baked goods out of the oven with a mitted hand. Honey bars, said Dinette, in her charming southern drawl. She placed the tray on the counter. Give it a minute to cool before digging in, okay? Archer put his backpack in one of the kitchen table chairs and went to give his grandma a hug. Hi, sweetheart, she said, squeezing him back. How was school? Great, Archer said, and he took a seat at the kitchen table, facing away from his grandmother so she wouldn't see the sour look his face made every time he lied. The guilt of paying someone to write his essays was crushing. He didn't want to think about what would happen if she ever found out her grandson wasn't as picture-perfect as their lawn. Wonderful, Dinette replied, distracted. Y'all sit tight while those honey bars cool. I'm going to go wash up. All that baking made me work up a sweat. Be right back. With that, Dinette removed her apron, hung it on a hook in the pantry, and left the room. Mabel took a seat next to Archer. So, the babysitting job? Was that a yes? Mabel's eyebrows rose expectantly. Archer pursed his lips and crossed his arms over his chest. I'm going to need more information. How about you start by telling me about your last babysitting job on Spite Lane?